living, folks, in an extraordinary moment in history. In the United States, in the world. This image that was kind of this iconic image that we're using for this series. I mean, you can look at what's going on in the world with climate change and what Trump's doing and the geopolitical tensions and the whole kind of thing. You can see the world falling to pieces or difficult, and you can kind of see gloom and doom. But you can also look at the other side of it. It's like, oh my God, we have these world historic technologies coming. We have these tools. We have these other pieces lining up here that we could actually drive great progress. And we could reinvent America for the 21st century, and we could actually really make moves towards a much better world. And it's that kind of divine line. We are here in that moment, and we're here in the Bay Area, which is a critical piece of the puzzle to figuring out this going forward. Now, the way I talk about this is I've been saying it for the last 3 years, is the great progression. I'm trying to get people to focus on we could be on the verge of a great era of progress, literally starting now, you could say, for the next 25 years. I'm trying to get people to stretch their minds in the same way we were trying to do in the 90s, trying to explain to people the next 25 years of what happens when the internet connects up everybody, and what happens when these little startups become giant companies, and what happens. And largely it did play out. And so I've been doing keynotes, and I've probably done 40 talks on this in the last few years. I've been doing increasingly my writing this. But what we've decided to do is start an event series around this. And we're doing it in partnership with Freethink. They bring the production values, the media, and their networks. Some of you here are coming from their networks. We're doing it with Shack 15. So when we said, hey, we want to throw this catalyze this network, they said, we're in. They're giving us the space, and a big portion of you are coming in from Shack, which is kind of a global network of all kinds of entrepreneurial characters, innovation characters. And then I bring a bunch of OGs, kind of the old guard, and also the networks that over the last 30 years I've collected over the time. People from the tech world, from Wired, from Global Business Network, from Long Now, from UC Berkeley, Stanford, a bunch of people. This is a crazy interesting network of people right now mashed up here. And so that's partly why we've reserved an hour and a half at the end here for you all to just to kind of have a party and connect up. I'm going to kind of give you a little quick history on what happened here. It was Freethink that approached me 3 years ago in 2022, and they said we needed another kind of long boom cover story. And they commissioned me on a 10,000-word magazine piece, which was called The Great Progression 2025, even though it's 2022. It came out in the fall, September 22. Just to put this in context, ChatGPT 3.5, generative AI, arrived on the scene in November of 22. So this predates that, actually. But I kind of came up with this idea of having to rethink how much possibility we had in the future in a more can-do, forward-thinking thing. That has now morphed into a Substack series, which I've been doing for the last 2 months here, a weekly essay that is just going gangbusters in Substack. For those of you who aren't on Substack, you got to tune into this thing. It's just a hive of great thinking. A lot of these pieces, I've tripled my audiences in the meantime. People are loving these ideas. I'm trying to give you an idea, not just because of me. I'm saying people want to positively think about the future and what's possible here. I also have a book deal coming out of this with HarperCollins. They grabbed the global rights. It's going to be coming out, and they want to push it out into the world. So we have a vehicle here to actually squeeze down some of the ways of the new way forward here. But the key thing is this quarterly series. We're going to start doing this every 3 months. Now, the big idea behind that starts this idea is that we are actually witnessing the arrival of 3 world historic technologies. These are technologies that we could only dream about 25, let alone 50 years ago. One is AI, just without question, a world-changing technology. And I'm not going to have to preach to the choir here, but I'm just saying we take that as a given, that this thing is a world-changing technology. The second one is we're making a transition into clean energies. Energy is going from a commodity, carbon commodity, to a technology, which means you can drive down the costs. So we're on the verge of abundant clean energy, with also kind of fusion on the horizon. And then we've also, in the last few years, figured out how to bioengineer living things, which is a crazy, wild thing. That's happened in the last 25 years, but recently, we've gotten the capability to do this and how we could rethink so many materials, products, as well as kind of extend lifespans and all kinds of things that are on the verge here. This is all hitting triple whammy at the same time. So we are actually entering an AI age that is essentially giving us a fundamental step change in capabilities. We can really reorganize the world around AI in ways that are profound and will never go back. Humans for centuries will be on AI. We are actually making this threshold into potential for abundant clean energy. And the function of any civilization is how much energy you can kind of draw off of without blowing out the climate. We're actually on that threshold. And we're on the threshold of an age of bioengineering, synthetic biology, and the like. One way to think what's happening to us today is that we are witnessing an old world that's dying, and the old world could be carbon energies are dying. The old world can be the kind of post-World War II, Pax Americana world and kind of the welfare state kind of thing going down. But we're also watching the new one is struggling to be born, basically. And what I'm calling this is the great progression. You are here. One of the reasons it's so confusing right now is we're caught in the middle of both things happening at the same time. And we're freaking out about one going down, and we're kind of starting to understand what's going up. Now, the key thing that people forget about is the scaling up holds the potential for what economist Carlota Perez calls the golden age of every transformative general purpose technology. Eventually gets to, once it gets over this hump and opens it up for everybody, and it actually can lead to what she calls a golden age of technology. We'll chat on that a little bit later. And so when you look back here, we have all three of these technologies had huge breakthroughs just 15 years ago. One was AlexNet and AI. That was essentially neural networks using kind of large language models, was able to identify pictures, cat pictures, better than any kind of human-coded AI could do. Then we had the breakthrough in CRISPR, cheap, easy gene editing breakthrough that happened there. And we had the third one, we didn't have the same exact date, but we basically had breakthroughs in scaling up solar energy. And so all three of these things has happened, but they're just taking off, and we haven't seen them all come into fruition. We haven't seen what's going to happen here. And what I'm trying to breathe life in, and what we're trying to do in this series, is breathe life into what does that look like? How does that work? How does that world actually operate? What's the best we can do? How can we make the most of this stuff? When you have transformative technologies, general purpose technologies, when they come out, if they're big enough deals, which these are, they kind of start reshaping how the economy works. And once the economy starts changing, it reshapes how society works. And ultimately, with certain technologies, if it's big enough, it's actually has civilizational scale change. And I'm basically positing here that we're in that kind of, we're starting this chain reaction. And so everyone's talking about the technologies. This series is going to start looking at the next layers. What's the economy we can make? What's the society we can do? And even some of this, across the century, how can we start thinking civilizationally? Now, when you start thinking that way, the closest thing we've been to in America, in kind of living memory here with some people, not anyone in this room, but my mother, for example, is what happened after the Great Depression, World War II. We saw a similar thing, a dismantling of an old world of colonialism and all kinds of stuff, laissez-faire capitalism. You saw new things kind of trying to struggle to get born, and they had setting up what eventually became the post-war boom. JFK, for example, fighting in the war, and later the first GI generation president was kind of there. And so we saw, and we can remember this, the great boom from 1945 to 1970. It goes down in his history as one of the biggest, greatest booms ever. We actually rebuilt America, we rebuilt Europe, we rebuilt the whole thing. That wasn't an odd thing, because actually we've done this several other times in history. But so we kind of go back to the 30s and the 40s there, and we kind of had, FDR was elected, but there was ferocious politics. The kind of Republican Party at that time was, literally on the verge of certainly isolationism, but even, fascism. You had world-changing technologies like nuclear fission happen, and you had basically geopolitics at an incredible scale, where you had the rising powers of Japan and Germany basically, we had to fight them off. But essentially, it's set up, after getting through that thing, this great boom. This is a big deal. We're on the scale of that kind of change, and we got to kind of tune into this. The nice thing about this is ground zero is San Francisco Bay Area. There is no other place on the planet, without argument, in terms of certainly these core technologies, and particularly AI. Now, you could kind of quibble on the other two a little bit, but the point is, you are here. You are literally sitting right there. We're in the middle of this, so we bear some responsibility, frankly, folks, for helping think around the new ways forward, how to make the most of this, how to make it work for everyone over the long haul. I want to just kind of run over some stuff here on technological step changes. We're making 3 of them. And to be fair, folks, there's been about 25, historians of technology say there's been about 25 world-changing general-purpose technologies. This is like the printing press, electricity, the wheel, and things like that. We're in that league. These are going to go down as basically world-changing capabilities. Now, one thing here is AI is a special category of this, because you could actually argue that humans, until the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, humans could augment their physical power by just hanging on to a horse or something for a plow. But once we cracked a machine, a steam-powered machine, we could get the power of 200 horses. That was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. beginning of the world that we're living in today, the modern world of prosperity and wealth and all the things that we take for granted today. But up until now, anything to do with intelligence had to have a human brain connected to it. Anything, the simplest thing, you're sensing the world, you're reasoning about what's going to happen, you're making a decision, you had to have a human onto it. Until now. We now have machines that can augment our mental powers. Not our physical powers, our mental powers, our intelligence. This is an unbelievable shift because intelligence can be applied to everything, every industry, every field. And that's essentially what people haven't fully grokked how big a deal this is going to be. Now, there's been other game-changing technologies, like if you go in the past, the Enlightenment, we had the printing press and it kind of changed the world, which is in more communication. We've had energy, we figured out how to dig coal out and kind of have energy at scale. And then we had, again, machines. Now we are in the same game now. Because you could say, AI is basically applied to everything, but it's, communication, simultaneous language translation. We're shifting in energy in a fundamental way, and we're shifting in production towards bioengineering, synthetic biology, and the like. Again, which could supersede industrial production in many ways over this century. So we're in a game where, when we first came out with electricity, it took us 40 years to kind of come to terms with that. And then we had the car revolution, and then we had the digital revolution that a lot of us in this room have lived through. But we're having a triple whammy, basically phase shift in 3 step changes in human capability. That's what I call the Great Compression. And so that's kind of the frame of what we're trying to do here. Now, he mentioned the long boom, that cover story. We had tried to project 25 years in the future, me and Peter Schwartz, a famous futurist at the time. And I will say one of the reasons you can basically do this is there's a way to start to understand tipping points in technology adoption curves. Every successful technology goes through this. A lot of people in this room, I don't have to repeat this. But the point is, boom, the tipping points. When do the tipping points hit? I'm arguing we are hitting the tipping points on all 3 of those. They're all tipping. It's not like debate, is it going to happen, when's it going to happen? It's happening. It's going to go fast. And so one thing about tipping points is up until that point, everyone kind of underplay, it's not quite working. Boom, after it, they think, oh my God, this is amazing. We're on the amazing point of all 3 of these, basically. Now, this is Colada Perez's version. I kind of borrowed this, we reworked this. But she puts it in a bigger way that every major technology like that, from a societal point of view, goes through a gilded age when it's a frenzy of kind of making money. And then after this turning point or tipping point, particularly with government intervention, if you kind of intervene it the right way, you can make it work for everybody. And that's the golden age. And so I'm saying that we're at that stage now where we have to figure out the new way forward, and we need some intervention to make it work for everybody. The long boom version of this, for people in the room that remember that stuff, this is not the same scale, but we saw the old media dying. We saw the new digital media coming. I was trying to write about this, the long boom, looking out there. I was there. A lot of you people in your room were there. It was like, we understand how that works. Because when you went back into the 90s, the Mac came out, and then the web came, and then the dot-com boom, a little frenzy there of making money. And then we basically had the long boom. So what I'm saying is we're just applying the same thing to this because nuclear. So what happened in the last 40 years, we built the power of these computer chips. That's what the long boom said. We're going to keep getting stronger. We're going to connect everything to the internet. Okay, happened. Then we got to digitize all our information. Then we got to get it all in the cloud. And then, that took 15 years of convincing every business to do that. Then we had to have prosperous tech companies to pour billions into this, since the government wasn't doing it. And only then we got AI. But here's the point. The foundation for AI is built. It's done. We don't have to wait like in the mid-90s and say, well, someday someone's going to have fiber optic cable to your house. That took 20 years, right? That's all done. So this is going to move fast, probably faster than any tech transition we've ever seen. Now, technological revolutions go through 2 big revolutions, go through 2 stages. And I'll give you just the car one everyone gets. And so I just want to do this quick. But it took about 40 years from the Model T Ford to get a gas station in every neighborhood, to build roads, to figure out where to drill oil. 40 years it took to do that. But then after the war, when we finally did that, everyone had a car. And they said, well, what can you do with a car? And then it was like, oh, shit, we can do the suburbs, malls, drive-ins. It just exploded in innovation and fundamentally changed the world, fundamentally changed what America was. We're in that same thing now. The foundation is we've already got, we spent 40 years trying to explain, what the hell the cloud was to everybody. And now we're at the point where, what can we do with AI? We can do it, executive assistants for everyone, individual tutors. Oh, wow, autonomous vehicles, you can start to see them, right? It's like now we're just starting explosion of innovation in all directions. So we are all going to get personal assistants for everybody. It's just happening. I mean, in fact, in the next 2 years, there'll be agents. You're going to be surrounded by, this is just one person. You're going to have 25, whatever, agents in every direction telling you what everything you know. If you know a little bit about climate, you don't know shit about, finance, let your agent help you do that, Anyhow, it's crazy. So it's possible productivity rates could go up, growth could go up. There's a bunch of things. We might have another kind of raring 20s kind of thing. That's some economists are starting to think this. Hey, this is going to do it. I'm going to talk to Stephen Johnson about this in a minute. Same thing with tutors. Now, so here's a good example. Now we have AI. Clearly, you could have a tutor for every kid. We know that basically everyone in this room had one teacher to 30 kids. A few of us got it. Hopefully, a lot of people in this room got it. Middle of the people kind of got it, and the people at the bottom had no idea what was going on, but it was one teacher, she or he was trying to do their best. We know with human teachers, you can take any kid in that group, put them in the top 5% of the class with one human attention. So it's clear that we're going to be able to basically supplement this, assembly line of education with one AI tutor that learns what the kid is like for their whole life. And then for that matter on, that tutor can kind of live with you for the rest of your life. This is possible now. Why aren't we thinking from scratch how to redo education from scratch as opposed to grafting onto something or figuring out if a kid is cheating with it? So what brings up this abundant thing. Rich people always had tutors. But what happens when everybody has a tutor? That's abundant education. Same thing with energy. One thing is if solar is so damn cheap, drives the price. Poor people will be driving electric cars because they're going to cost $5,000 or something. We have this possibility of abundance. That's why you're starting to see it in politics coming up. So everyone here is probably thinking, okay, well, how are we going to get from here to there? And I'm going to tell you one way we're going to do it. So what I would say, and again, this could be we have a whole party, we can talk about this later, and I'll argue probably everybody at the bar till midnight, but basically, Trump is a populist backlash against the old thing that wasn't working. And frankly, the old thing wasn't working. The kind of Pax Americana, we couldn't sustain it with our deficits, the welfare state, the bureaucratic thing, it just really wasn't solving the problems we need. I mean, to be honest, no matter what your politics are, it's been 80 years, those two things. And he's just, I think the main reason the Americans voted for him in their gut was somebody was going to at least try to change, as opposed to just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, which is what the Dems essentially keep saying all the time. And so I think, don't think of him as the future, think of him as a spasm against the past. But what's interesting about American politics is we've gone through this many times. And basically there's a pendulum swing in American politics. Let's say we're at the 50-50 spot here, right? All it takes is a shift of 10% of the country into one camp or the other, and then you have a 60-40 majority, and then you can drive change for as long as 40 years. And this happens frequently, as I'm going to give it in a minute. So all we have to do is one way or the other, depending on what your politics are, and it doesn't have to be the same kind of vicious politics that we got now, but I'm saying to build a political coalition going forward, future forward, is not that hard. We've seen, for example, if you go after the war, that one I just told, the Golden Age, that was a progressive period. That was focused on equality, government intervention to build public infrastructure, tax the rich quite large. I mean, the taxes were like 90%, 70%. That was a period that a lot of things worked. Then we had a different kind of pendulum swing. We've kind of had 40 years of which has also got its revitalizing side, unleashed the private sector. We were able to build the internet, all kinds of stuff around that. And to be fair, that was a lot of progress in that period too. So I'm just saying we're on the verge of another thing. Trump is just trying to get rid of all 80 years of that, because both sides, Republicans and Democrats, kind of bought into that. But the American people are like, we got to do something different. So I'm thinking this is the thing. And this is where we're at. And I think there's room to start to talk about a new way forward in politics, about what we could do here. Because what's interesting about American history is we've seen these pendulum swings. Basically, there was a populist backlash against the original crew in the revolution. There was a whole civil war. There was a progressive era that even the Republicans and the Democrats at the time were both kind of progressive. Then there was the kind of post-war thing I just mentioned. And then there was the Reagan Revolution. We shifted that way. And even Dems kind of got onto small government idea and all that. There's something happening now. It's not Trump, but it's not clear who it is. But I don't want to personify it. The moment is ripe for this kind of thing, is what I'm saying. Now, here's the crazy thing about this. Those are revitalizations. 3 times in American history, we have completely reinvented the country. And I would say we're in one of these now. This is a crazy thing. It literally comes down to every 80 years. There's a bunch of reasons for this. I've written essays on this trying to explain it. Without going into the reasons for this, I will say we've watched this happen. I mentioned to you it happened coming off the Great Depression, World War II. I went through that one. But the same thing happened in the Civil War. What was happening there is they had the old system dying with slavery. And then the whole new thing being born was manufacturing economy, free labor. And then we had this kind of period coming off the Civil War of the boom. Lincoln was in the middle of there. And what happened is once we settled that, after 700,000 Americans died in that fight, we think it's bad now. I mean, 700,000 people died in this debate over that one. But you actually had a golden age. You had a great expansion, Transcontinental Railroad, Homestead Act. The American dream was born out of that whole period. So we had these tensions, these horrible politics leading up to that. And we had, new technologies like Bessemer steel for the railroads. Things happened, and then it also shifted. It even happened in the Revolution. If you really think of that as a reinvention of America or an invention of America, the old system was the colonial system dying. The new one was this new thing trying to be born. We basically had a boom coming off the Revolutionary War. George Washington was smack in the middle of it. And we did have a golden age. There was a huge expansion. All kinds of crazy stuff happened. Louisiana Purchase, all kinds of stuff. We had the same tensions in those 15 years. Boston Tea Party, Declaration of Independence. We had to have a war. So what I'm trying to say to you is we're in another one of those moments now. Now, the final little kicker I'm going to do here is the bigger way to think about this is we might even be in such profound change, the AI is such a profound change, that we might be closer to what happened in the Enlightenment. And that was the kind of roughly 1680 to 1800. But in that period of time, we came up with 6 crazy big inventions that the world is basically still defined by. We basically had mechanical engines, I mentioned that. We had carbon energies at scale. We had the Industrial Revolution around those steam engines. We had financial capitalism to keep it going. We had to invent that. That didn't happen before this. We had representative democracy. That was the American version of that, although the French tried a shot at that too. And we had nation states. These didn't exist before. And they are still the world we're all working in, but they're also screwing things up now, including climate change. So what happened in that period was you had the technologies came out in the first 40 years. That was the breakthrough. The economy morphed in the second 2 years, Industrial Revolution, all that scale, like financial capitalism. And ultimately, it was the political revolutions that came after that, French and American. What I'm kind of just planting the seed here, and we're going to explore it later in this series, is are we in something comparable? Are we in such a big change of fundamental tech changes that we're essentially now, just like those, we've got our absolute game changer, AI. That's like a civilizational scale reboot. But also, we're watching clean energies emerging out of energy. We may see some kind of biological engineering revolution out of industrial production. We may see, and this takes more open-ended, it's going to take a while, different kind of capitalism, more equitable, more better on the environment. We might see something supersede this goofy thing that we're still trapped in from 250 years ago. That's certainly not working. Trump's banging his head against it. And then even some kind of way to coordinate global governance. I don't know how this is going to work. I'm not just saying, but I'm saying there is something at the scale of that era that I think we have to at least open ourselves up to. And I think we've seen the tech come. I just laid out to you. There's probably going to be the economics. And ultimately, it might take a while for the politics. But you are here. Out of the pure tech game or into the innovate everything else game. And that's what I'm trying to get us technologists or people rooted in tech to be thinking big here. Now, the final little kicker is it even gets more complicated because it's happening for everybody. And we've got China, and so there's basically 2 AI superpowers. If that's the core technology of the future, there's 2 superpowers. There's nobody else on that, by the way. And there's been a battle from the history of the country between democracies and autocracies. We're slipping a little bit here, too. We might become an autocracy. But I'm just saying, the point is, we've been part of a global community on this. And so the AI way of the Chinese is pretty much authoritarian top-down. And boy, will it be a great authoritarian tool to monitor people constantly, the whole thing. And that's a model for the world. And then there's the Western way, the American way, which is kind of this bottom-up, crazy-ass thing. But honestly, I think we'd rather figure out the way forward of this. And so I think we have a responsibility beyond us, beyond America, to the world, to figure out how AI works in the future. You are here. We are caught in this moment. It's an extraordinary moment. It's fraught with peril, but it also has so much positive possibilities here, folks. We are at this moment where we could actually play a difference in shifting the zeitgeist of this country, potentially the world. And it's not out of the question that people in 50, 100, 1,000 years from now, they're going to look back. Oh, here's where. Here's the United States. We're still here. But anyhow, it's interesting that, let's think people in the future will look back and they'll say, people in the middle of that that period, They figured out AI. They finally got over to AI, and the AI that we're still using, centuries in the future. They say, they finally got on to clean energy, abundant clean energy. So yeah, they finally solved the climate change thing. We figured they were going to do it eventually, but the glad thing they did. Then one more notch is, they figured out bioengineering. We're able to kind of make a much more sustainable world, more in sync with nature, extend their lifespans, and get rid of diseases. That's great. All the things that we now use. So yeah, they were able to kind of pull this entire foundation for a civilization that we're still living in. 500, 1,000 years from now. And they might even go one more notch and they'd say, wouldn't it have been an amazing thing to be living in that time, in that period, where they were making all those insane choices? Wouldn't it be exciting to be part of that thing? Wouldn't it have been something to be in San Francisco at that time, at that moment, when everything was so fraught with energy, but also could change so fundamentally? And I just want to end this by saying, folks, we are here. We are now. We have this possibility. And so what we're going to try to do with this series is we're going to try to pull together the networks, drive a conversation, get people thinking in this direction and around this framework, and do the best we possibly can to actually figure out this new way forward and figure out the new way into the Great Progression. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and welcome.